Today we broadcast one of the gutsiest stories of recovery that I've ever had the pleasure of hearing on Take It From Us. Our show first broadcast this inspiring yet sometimes devastatingly sad story of a mother and her two children about 8 years ago. She escaped abuse in her home country of Chile and decided to choose New Zealand as it was far away. It was as far away from Chile as any country could possibly be. Yet the repercussions of that decision by radio guest and mother Esther Reardon had repercussions she could never have imagined when she boarded her plane in Chile with her two young children, with a third on the way. When she arrived in Auckland, she spoke no English, sat at the airport for more than a day wondering what to do. Here is part of Esther's story, which was first broadcast in 2011 on Mental Health Radio. Take It From Us. Today's broadcast involves a guest who has conquered challenges that would flatten many of us, and I really mean that, flatten many of us. I'm sure that if I'd gone through what our guest has gone through, boy, I'd be in a lot less good shape. She's grappled with mental illness, financial stress, abuse, immigration challenges as a refugee, and the pressures of raising 3 children as a solo parent. Yet her resilience shines through it all, and indefatigable, that's a difficult word to say, spirit that has got her through the toughest times. In fact, her story of survival, recovery and eventual success in New Zealand is one of the gutsiest I've ever heard. With 3 children, Esther Reardon knew she just had to get through the painful time. Today, she's certainly done that. She's graduated as a qualified nurse and passed her state examinations after years of study. She's getting married next month and says that 2011 has been her best year ever. To anyone who knows Esther, that's an amazing recovery and turnaround. And one of the people who has supported Esther for many, many years and has contributed greatly to that amazing recovery and turnaround is in the studio today. Diane Jallis is an employment consultant with Work Focus, which is the framework supported employment service. And Diane, it's great to have you in the studio supporting Esther.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming along. Yeah. So, Esther, welcome to Take It From Us. You come from Chile. What was life like there, before you left?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me today. I'm a bit nervous, so it's the first time that I am in the radio.
Yeah.
In Chile, it was really difficult for me, especially because I suffered from many years of domestic violence and abuse. I had 2 kids, which I needed to look after. And it was a really difficult decision to leave my country, especially leaving my family, leaving people who you loved, and the support that you have around. But I needed to change my life and make sure that my kids had a real life, because it wasn't a good life there. We had people around, we have many things, we had maybe money, but we didn't have safety at all. So we were living in like a prison and without having one. And I needed to change that for them, so I decided to leave my country, and I didn't know where to go.
How long did it take you to make that decision?
It took me only, I think, a month, because a very bad event happened in my life, what was really at risk. So I decided to make a quick decision, and I escaped from my country in a few months.
So New Zealand, did you know anything about New Zealand when you came here?
No, nothing. I left Chile to another country where I had few days to think about it, and I found the farthest country from Chile, and it was New Zealand.
The farthest country from New Zealand?
From
Chile, right. Yeah, well, it is quite a way, isn't it?
Yeah, especially because I didn't know that you needed residency to live in another country. I didn't know that this country was only English-speaking, and I didn't speak any English at all when I arrived here.
I think you told me that you could say hello and goodbye.
Yeah, It was only 2 words. I never had English in my life, so...
So what was it like arriving at, I imagine, Auckland Airport, a new country with 2 children and a third on the way, I think, and you didn't speak any English?
It was shocking because I didn't...
Sorry, it was...
It was really shocking.
Shocking?
Yeah, to arrive here and not knowing anyone, especially because I had all those dreams that I hoped to have a good life and my kids being happy, but I didn't know the reality. And when I arrived, it was a real shock because I didn't understand anything. I didn't know what to do. And I was sitting in Auckland Airport, I think, for a day with my kids without knowing where to go.
Really? Sitting in the airport for a day?
Yeah.
Did anyone come to talk to you?
No, no one. So we sit there, and I was thinking about what to do next because I needed to do something. And I started to look at the white pages, and I found one Latin American association which I contact, and they asked me to go to meet them. So I took a taxi and I arrived there, and from that I started to do my papers and all of that. It was a real hard time, especially because I didn't understand anything. I didn't know how to speak English at all.
You were able to read the white pages, though, did you? Right.
I think only because I was looking for something that said Latin American. And it was the first thing that I found.
So you were able to identify those 2 words, Latin American.
Yeah. And
did you get the support from that Latin American association that you sort of hoped for?
Yeah, I found support, and I was there with them for a few months, and after that I left and I started to live my own life because I think it's really important to move away sometimes from just having normal life, but I needed to do something else, and my kids needed to have a proper home because there was like a refugee or place where many people from different countries come. So,
how was your level of independence? I mean, to do this, it sounds as though you'd need to be very independent and pretty together.
That was one of the big things. I think I grew up so much when I arrived here because in my country I never had that. I think I was 24 when I learned to take the first bus. I was so dependent on my parents all my life, and I didn't know what to do without them. But here, I didn't have anyone, and I had 2 kids that I needed to that I needed to feed, that I needed to have clothes, that I needed to have a house and everything. So I didn't think about anything. I just every day I was doing things to keep them alive and to keep us well.
I mean, some people might have got very, very scared and panicky and not able to speak the language, but it sounds as though you sort of settled into that independence fairly quickly.
Yeah, but I was hard. I was always panicking, and I was sometimes in my room crying and without my kids knowing what was happening, but I needed to be strong for them. And I was carrying with me at all times a dictionary, a Spanish and English dictionary, and I used to go to the supermarket and everywhere with that because I never had anyone to support me, so I needed to do those things by myself. And I was trying to talk to people just with the dictionary and saying, can you understand me? At least, and showing them what I try to say, because sometimes you can say things but they don't understand the meaning. So it was quite difficult, but I always try my best.
Did people come up to you and help you buy things in the supermarket and support you? Or
Yeah, they used to explain to me things about the food, and because it's really different, especially in with another language. So I always receive support from people.
So what did you do first as part of your survival plan?
I started to work in cleaning, and it was really new for me. And while my daughters were in school, I was working. And after that, I decided to join because of my experience looking after my mom for many years in Chile with cancer and terminally ill. So I was hoping to join at that time like a caregiving job in a rest home. So I did that, and I applied to join a rest home, and I always remember there was the only job that I had, but I used to work many, many hours there from 7 in the morning to 11 p.m., so it was really hard to be able to survive. And at that time, I was having always problem with my immigration papers, so I needed to start to pay for those things and fighting to be here.
And that involved employing legal help and running up some big debts to support your application to stay in New Zealand.
Yeah, it was really expensive, and it was just bad news at all times, because my application didn't go through, and it was always declined. And it was a really difficult time, because at that moment I had a third baby, and I started to suffer from mental illness. So it was a real hard time for me.
Well, it's quite a coincidence, actually, because we met yesterday for coffee and a bit of a chat, a bit of a briefing for this radio show. And when I got back, I was sent something to say that it's Postnatal Depression Awareness Week this week, from the 13th to the 19th of November. Mm-hmm. And I believe that postnatal depression was sort of what instigated your mental illness.
Yeah. While I was pregnant, I started to suffer from depression, and when my baby was born, I suffered from postnatal depression. And it wasn't just for a few days, and it wasn't for a few months, it was for many years. It was 3 or 4 years that I was with this big depression. I suffered from psychosis and from panicking attacks, anxiety disorder, and many things. So it was a combination of symptoms, but also a combination of illness, I think, because it wasn't only one thing, it was many things. And with all the life difficulties, it was harder to get through. But I was just there fighting at all times. But as I said before, I was trying to work, I was trying to survive, and sometimes I didn't have that hope at all.
Well, it sounds as though it would have been tough enough without the postnatal depression and the psychosis and, the panic attacks. That must have just about crippled you.
Yeah, it was hard. And I always remember those times, and they were really scary, because I used to hide in my room by myself because my kids didn't... I didn't want them to know what was going on, so I was always really strong in front of them, because they needed that. We didn't have anyone to support us, so I needed to be that person. I needed to be the mother and the father and the worker and everyone.
All those roles that, some of us only take on 1 or 2 of those roles, but you took them on more than just being a mother and maybe a worker, and in the face of mental illness as well.
Yeah. And when I think about those times, I never think about someone who is brave or things like that. I think I needed to do that.
You've had to constantly persevere?
Yeah, I had to. Yeah. And I think I will always. It's something that is with me, and it sits with me.
But you're describing 2011 as your best year yet, and there's some great news about getting married next month, and you've finished not exactly finished your studies, but you've graduated as a nurse and done the national...
state exams.
But you've got some plans to carry on studying too.
Yeah, 2011 has been great. It was really hard in the beginning, because working full-time and studying full-time, which I did for 4 years and a half, it was really tough. But I needed to do it, because I still carry on some debts from my immigration papers. So I think it will be until 2 more years that I will finish to paying off that money. But I needed to work in full-time to provide food and housing for my kids, and I needed to study also full-time to have a better future for us. So I finished on the 4th of August. I graduate on that day. And
that's the 4th of August?
2011.
Right.
So I finished my clinical practice in one of the inpatient units during June. and I finished all my papers at uni in July, and I graduated on the 4th of August. And on the 19th of August, I received my state exams results, which I passed.
How did you feel about receiving that information?
It was amazing. It was something, you can be qualified as a nurse and have a degree, but being a registered nurse is totally different. So it was something that I needed to accomplish. And when I got that, it was amazing. And it's been really a really amazing year. So after that, I met my husband-to-be, and I know him since he was little, and we just reunited on that day. It was the same day that I received my state exams.
Oh, wonderful. So that was a double whammy good news.
Yeah.
But when you say that you knew him when you were very young in Chile, when you went to school?
Yeah. No, when I went to school, I used to live in a really small countryside in Chile, and I used to spend all my summers there and part of the year. So it was since I was born. My whole family is from there, and he comes from the same place. So I knew him when he was around 12, 13. So I used to see him at all times during those years, but I never knew that he was here in New Zealand. So he's been here for 7 years, and I've been here for 10 years, and I never met him.
And how did you come to meet?
I went to a Latin American club and to celebrate my state exams, and I met him that day over there. So
Yeah. So when were you introduced to the support that Framework and Diane, who's in the studio with us, when were you introduced to that support?
I was introduced to that after being with a transcultural psychotherapy from Cornwall House, and Diane was asked by them to support me during my mental illness, which I came above, or I recover. I don't think that I will ever recover because it's a life journey, but I will. But without her, I wouldn't be here today. So she was the only person who believed in me.
So Diane sort of held the hope for you that you had lost in those really dark days.
Yeah, it was the only person who was there for me. And it wasn't just once a month or once a week, it was every day.
Yeah, and you've given Diane an invitation to your wedding today, and that demonstrates how close the two of you are over, how many years has it been?
Oh, it was, when we met, it was in 2004. So it's been many years, 7 years since, and she supported me for maybe until 2010. So it was always there. Even when she was my community support worker, she was always there for me.
Right.
And the day that I graduated, she was there also for me. And it was like, she's more than just a support person. She's part of me.
Part of you, and a good friend.
Yeah, she's an amazing friend. Without her, I wouldn't be here. Because I used to, when I joined my studies and when I decided to overcome mental illness, because you have to make a decision. And I used to go with her everywhere, and everyone used to say to me, you won't be able to study ever. Your English is not good. You can't do that. Also, you suffer from mental illness. And she was always there, and she was like, no, you can do it. And I believe in you. You can do it. And she was always there for me at all times, even if it was night, day, anytime. So everything that I have now, I know is because of her, even when she doesn't think that.
Right. It brings tears to my eyes when she talks like that.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah.
You said that you had to make a decision, you had to make a conscious decision to recover from your mental illness. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah. I needed to make a decision because at that time everything was dark. And it wasn't only my mental illness, but it was a lot of discrimination, stigma, but also was my papers. I wasn't safe anywhere. I didn't know, even when I loved New Zealand and I felt it was my home, I didn't know if I was going to be here. I didn't know if my kids were going to be here, which it was really tough because they loved New Zealand and we love New Zealand really.
So the whole family was falling in love with New Zealand, but you had this big question mark as to whether you would get approval from the immigration authorities, to be able to stay here.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was really hard and tough times, and we will keep receiving bad news about our papers, and we needed to leave the country. So they just sent the last letter saying that we needed to leave the country, which I decided to fight for, and Diane helped me through these times always, and we collect a lot of support letters, and we talked to my lawyer, which also helped me a lot, and we decided to fight it, and finally in 2006, and on the 26th of October, I received my residency.
Yeah, 26th of October, what year was that?
2006.
Ah.
It was on humanitarian grounds.
On humanitarian grounds, right? So, that challenge on its own is enough to, really upset and disturb many people. But you were also grappling with your mental illness as well.
Yeah, and it was always like that. It was like every day was a new problem, or every week when I was seeing the light, finally, it was just clearing out, it was something else that happened. And it was always my life like that since I was in Chile. So it was one problem to another that I needed to fight. And that is what I said. If it wasn't for Diane that was next to me, I wouldn't be here today.
So your children kept you going,
yeah.
But there must have been some positive messages that you sent to yourself to overcome these issues and challenges that kept on cropping up all the time.
Yeah, it was, I think, a part of me that used to talk to myself, and I used to say, you need to do this. You have kids. You decided to be a mother, and it's your responsibility to keep them going. But also for myself, I deserve to be happy. So it was one of the things that I learned through the years when I suffered from mental illness, that I deserved to be happy. That it wasn't just about living, it was about being happy.
You mentioned discrimination and stigma, and of course, Take It From Us is its goal is to try and reduce discrimination and stigma. Did that discrimination occur because of your mental illness, or did it occur because of your English and you were a refugee and discriminated against because of that?
I think it was a combination. I think people still don't understand really about mental illness, and they think more of a disability rather than something that you have to live with and learn to live with. And it's not about, for me, mental illness is not a disability at all. Mental illness for me is something that enabled me to be who I am today. I am really proud of what is happening to me, but I'm really proud of saying that I had lived experience in mental illness.
So you actually describe yourself as an ex-psychiatric patient?
Yeah. That is one of the things that I always describe myself, because I think people think that when you describe having a lived experience in mental illness, people think, oh, you are an ex-psychiatric patient. And language matter. How you say things and how you refer to people, it matters. And for me, listening to some people which talk about mental illness was always about ex-psychiatric patients or psychiatric patients. And for me, I'm really proud of who I am. And for me, being an ex-psychiatric patient is who made me the person that I am today.
Well, you're an ambassador for recovery, aren't you? And an amazing ambassador, because you've not only conquered the challenge of mental illness, but you've had all these other challenges that you had to overcome at the same time. I mean, it could have become a hugely vicious spiral that took you down very quickly.
Yeah, and it did in the beginning, because I didn't know what to do. But I was, as I said before, with Diane next to me and always telling me, believing in myself. And she was believing in myself more than me. It gave me that. I think support is really important, and was one of the things that I was missing here in New Zealand, because I didn't have anyone. But I was the luckiest person to meet Diane, and she's been always there for me, and I know that she will be there for me always.
Well, that's a wonderful recommendation for Diane's work and the frameworks, support in terms of Diane being both a community support worker and now an employment consultant with Work Focus.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
And this is Sheldon Brown, host of Mental Health Radio, and we've got Declan Curran with us doing the technical work and doing a grand job as well. And I just wanted to emphasise that interview was first done in 2011. There were some absolutely wonderful pieces of gold in there. I just made some notes here that she is proud to have had a mental health experience, and she's proud of who she is as well. And I think those are two things that can help any of us into recovery and into greater health. For the first time, actually, in my broadcasting career, I went back to Esther with the help of employment consultant Diane Jallis, who you heard during our interview. Not only was it lovely to catch up with Esther, but to get an update about her life. In short, Esther said she was very blessed. And what a wonderful way to describe one's life, very blessed. As usual, she was working hard. She had worked for several district health boards over the past 7 years and is currently working in one of the crisis mental health teams at Counties Manukau. She did marry, we mentioned that in the broadcast done in 2011, and she has a fourth child, a boy who is now 5 years old. Esther described herself as really well and focused on her family living in East Auckland. So if listeners have got any feedback at all on that inspiring story of recovery, you could get in touch with us at sheldon.brown@framework.org. That is .org.nz. It was just lovely to listen to that interview again before I decided to rebroadcast it, and I think it's wonderful that Esther has been such a great ambassador for recovering from mental health experience and is working in crisis mental health.